Hey, it's Jeffrey.
And Elizabeth.
And what number devo are we up to today?
Number 18.
Let's talk about the wrath of God. Read that for us, Elizabeth.
The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness.
Let's get one thing straight. The wrath of God does not mean that God loses control. And what I am arguing today is this, that God does not punish us for our sins. God allows us to be punished by our sins. There is consequence to the decisions that you make in how you behave towards other people. And there are three consequences found in these three verses. And the first consequence, of course, is that we become addicted to thinking, but we never arrive at the truth.
For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being, and birds and animals and reptiles.
And every addiction comes about because we, first of all, become addicted to thinking. We become obsessive in our thinking. But you and I have this wonderful freedom because in John chapter 8 and verse 32,
we read that Jesus said, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free."
Consequence number 2 is that we are forever worshipping, and human beings are spiritual, so we are constantly worshipping, but never arriving at the certainty of our salvation.
Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being, and birds and animals and reptiles.
And look at that. You see in the Old Testament, when they turned their back on God, they began worshipping a golden calf. Now, this may sound strange, but some of those Old Testament prophets were the most wonderful stand-up comedians. And they talked about, Isaiah talked about a man who takes a piece of wood, fashions it into an idol, worships it, and then from verse 16,
half of the wood he burns in the fire. Over it he prepares his meal. He roasts his meat and eats his fill. He also warms himself and says, "Ah, I am warm. I see the fire." From the rest he makes a god, his idol. He bows down to it and worships. He prays to it and says, "Save me, you are my God."
and of course we know that good comedy flows out of tragedy. Okay, consequence number 3 is that we as human beings desire to be connected to one another. And so we are forever experiencing intimacy or sexual pleasure, but never feeling a true connection or that we belong with another human being.
Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their error.
And marriage and sex were God's idea. And he has a lot to say about it. For example, in Hebrews 13 and verse 4,
marriage should be honoured by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral.
And that's God's will for your life, is to find someone that you can spend the rest of your life with and to enjoy one another, to enjoy intimacy, but most of all, to enjoy a wonderful and rewarding partnership. And so, in conclusion, I'm going to ask you the same question. Are we punished by our sins or are we punished for our sins? And this is why it is so important for you to have the right attitude, because righteousness is its own reward. It will protect your feelings, it will protect your mind, and it will protect your relationship with a holy God.